In episode number 436 of the Reasons I'm Broke podcast, we cover 2021's Free Comic Book Day announcement.
We also have comments from Zack Snyder on the recent Knightmare Timeline.
This week we reviewed The Department of Truth number 4 as chosen by you.
All of this and so much more on today's show.
Hello and welcome to your award-winning The Reasons I'm Broke podcast, bringing you the reasons we're broke every single week, ranging from comics, movies, TV, video games, and more. I am Lady in Suit Daniel.
And I am Emperor Palpa Kelli.
For those of you new to the podcast, the way we format the show is first we go through some news. We head into our Patreon shoutouts, which are thank yous to those of you who make the show possible. Go into our comic book highlight as chosen by you on Twitter. And we end it with the Brokehead Block, which is what Palpa Kelli and I have been doing this week.
Before we move into our news, I just have to know, what color suit are you wearing?
It'd have to be red because I immediately thought of the Lady in Red song from well before you were born, I'm sure. But
I was well before I was born.
What was your thought? What color?
I was going back and forth. Like, I didn't know if it was like a navy blue power suit with your hair in that tight bun, like you were just going to take care of some shit. Or is it in a swimsuit? I don't know.
It depends on the day. That's all it is.
Just depends on your mood. Mm-hmm. But our first bit of news comes from my best dude, Mr. Steve Jeppy.
That's right. I love Jeppy. He sent the store a calendar. All stores got a calendar.
Sweet.
It had a bunch of comic covers on it. It's decorated up with all of his different assets. All of the members of the Jeppy Family Enterprises name. And it's on the back, too. Big fucking letters. I sent you the picture. Just it says Jeppy Family Enterprises and then Friends. Like everyone else. Boom Studios, Alliance, PhD, everyone.
There were only two things I wanted from this calendar. It either one had to only have the Archies and the Batmans on it. Or two, it'd be a calendar of Steve Jeppy, like doing different things, like in a suit, the shirtless Steve Jeppy, but he has to Photoshop his head onto like a real buff guy.
Yes.
That is what this should have been.
Well, those are the ones that he's sending to all of those models on Twitter.
Oh, okay.
They got
that's
that
right.
version.
The shirtless Steve
That's
Jeppy
right.
calendar.
Well, Jeppy Family Enterprises has announced that Free Comic Book Day will be on August 14th next year. They have settled on a day. They're not doing the Free Comic Book Summer like they did this year. I remember I sent in feedback. Every store had to send in a little form and talk about what worked and what didn't during Free Comic Book Summer. And I know when I sent it in, I was pretty much like, look, one day is what works best as far as a Free Comic Book Day event, but I totally understand why we weren't and would not do that this year because of the pandemic and everything going on. So traditionally, though, moving forward, normal circumstances, a Free Comic Book Summer does not work. The idea behind it, and I know we talk about it every year, is it really appeals to families, to the more casual reader, the community at large, as opposed to specifically comic book readers. A lot of times the comic books that they release on Free Comic Book Day are reprints. Sometimes it'll be new material, which promotes upcoming arcs, which is great for both the readers and the casual buyer. But for the most part, anytime we do get Free Comic Book Day, it ends up being a family event where people bring in their kids and their friends, and everyone comes in, gets free comics, and buys something extra on the side, usually Funko Pops, pins, other back issues. It ends up working out really well. And for Free Comic Book Summer, we ended up releasing them each week, each Wednesday, but that message did not get out to the community at large. It's simply not the same. It's not as marketable, and it was totally fine. Instead of the Wednesday Warriors, they got their free comics each week, but even they weren't overly excited about these. They were like, all right, what are the ones this week? I guess I'll take this one. It wasn't something that they were specifically looking forward to. It was all about New Comic Book Day instead. So in the end, it didn't really, it wasn't a success like it was in previous years. So this year, it sounds like they are going back to the one-day format, which I'm all for, assuming that we're safe enough to do so.
I think that's definitely smart. And even if let's say we get to that point and we're not in a safe enough environment to do that. I think you could spread it out over a few weekends, but make it the weekend and really hype it up and do some things around there. And say, yes, this is, limited number of people that we can have in the store, but we can still make this a really great time and not just throw it into free comic book or, new comic book day, because that doesn't really serve anybody, exactly like you pointed out.
Do you think that free comic book day deliveries are when he moves the most product between all the different docks?
100%. And because of COVID, we just had to have more deliveries.
We needed to make sure that the comics had extra space in there so that they made it safe and all. Don't worry that it was retaped. Don't pay attention to that.
It's just a new people in the packaging plant.
We were joking with the store owner, and we're like, yeah, you got to get these numbers into Mr. Jeppy. And he's like, I work for myself. And I'm like, don't let Mr. Jeppy hear you say that. Next thing you know, he disappears. Mr. Jeppy sends in like, hey, this is Tony. He's going to be your manager from now on. Hey, how you doing? And we're like, we're just nervous the whole time. This free comic book day is going to mark the 20th anniversary for the event. It feels like it's been way longer than that, but when I really reflect on it, I think I had participated in the second ever free comic book day. Back when I was a kid, I went to Dreamland Comics, and that was kind of a huge deal. It was kind of unheard of, but it wasn't the event that it is today. And throughout the years, especially as the modern comic book movies started really gaining popularity, the free comic book day events as well started really growing. And usually they centered it around the release date for a big movie. And over the last couple of years, of course, they do it around an MCU release. So all of the people that, especially if you're near a theater, a lot of the people that would go see the movie would then go to the comic book shop, get comic books or pops that reflected whatever they just saw, and kind of everyone won in that way in celebrating the fandom.
Overall, I think it's a great event. I've been to a few of them. I've had a lot of fun as a customer. I love, it's kind of like a mini convention, right? When you go, you have people who are dressing up and different artists that sometimes show up to the shops and different things like that. So it's unfortunate that you weren't able to do it this year. I think there's definitely ways where you could be safer about it, limit the number of people in the stores, like we said, but it's so much fun, and I'm happy they're doing it, and it sounds like it's going to be good for the Jeppy family this year.
A very successful free comic book day. He does have a quote here. CEO of Jeppy Family Enterprises, the parent company of Diamond, Steve said, quote, I am so happy to be making this announcement today and so proud of our work with retailers and vendors these last 20 years to bring more awareness to the comic books we all love. End quote. The comic books.
The comic books, the Archies and the Batmans.
And the Funk Pops and whatnot.
the Fuck Pops. That's what I want him to call. It's like, no, Steve, they're Funko Pops. The whatevers.
I just say fucking pop the dude. Same thing, right? No, Mr. Jeppy, that's not at all.
Steve can never go away. This man has to live forever. And even when he's gone, I still want to pretend he's somewhere still running Jeppy Family Enterprises, because his son is not as badass as he is. I'll tell you right now. What's his son's name? Do we know?
I follow him on Twitter and Instagram. I don't remember his name, but he would have to change his image completely when he took over the family business.
100%. I'm going to pretend he's Joe Jeppy.
I would accept that. Although Steve Jeppy doesn't fit either, but his image is so strong that now he's making the name Steve really badass. Publishers and books have yet to be revealed for Free Comic Book Day 2021, but DC is not expected to participate as they are no longer distributing with Diamond.
I imagine that DC would do their own free comic book something at some point. It'll be different, maybe tied in with Batman Day or Superman Day and do more things around that. I think that would be the right way to go for them. But no, when they refused to move some Jeppy product, they were out for good.
I remember this year they did do like a very weak Batman Day thing where you could buy and offer Batman masks, and everyone, I think, for the most part, ended up passing on them because there wasn't even really a book. Yeah, there really wasn't a book at all to go with Batman Day, and we couldn't really push it anyway. They had online activities, and people on Instagram and Twitter and all that were talking about Batman Day and celebrating the character, which is great, but honestly, every day is Batman Day.
Hell yeah, every day is Batman Day. They should just rename life to like the year of Batman and just do something every day. Because, I mean, we celebrate him every day.
It's a poor marketing move if you really think about it, because it's like, all right, well, Batman Day, that's like, all right, it's Tuesday. Yeah. It's Wednesday. What's the big deal? This is why no one shows up for that.
Because we're already celebrating in our home. We're like Olga G. Pataki with our little Batman gum thing in our closet.
I didn't put this as part of our news story, but it leads into the Infinite Frontier announcement. And with the March solicitations, a lot of us were wondering, all right, so after Future State, what is March going to look like? What are the books that are going to release? Are they going to be a range of new number ones? Well, ahead of time, we knew that some of these books were going to come back with their regular numbering like Batman, but everything else, what is going to happen? Well, it turns out that they're cutting their line. We knew they were going to do this too, but I think it's down to like 37 titles from over 52 if you counted like the Black Label stuff, or the new 52 a few, 5-7 years ago. And now with this one, they've really cut everything down to a very narrow 37. People speculate that after all of the firings that they did at DC, that it could get whittled down even more throughout next year, depending on how these sales end up doing. There are more and more comic shops that are now simply refusing to carry DC books. I know for our store, that's not something that we are even talking about. That would be if DC completely stopped publishing physical books. At that point, maybe we'd be forced to, but it's not something that out of spite we're doing, because we still want to offer those things for our readers, our subscribers. We're not sticking it to DC by saying, no, fuck you, we're not going to carry these anymore. It doesn't really work that way, because to them, you're just making that cycle go quicker, or you're making that decision for AT&T. You're telling them that you're totally fine with no DC books. And if you're one of those shops, then that's fine. If you can survive off of that, great. But for now, it's all about marketing what you can for the DC readers, finding the things that you are excited for, and seeing how 2021 turns out. Do you think that them cutting it down to 37 and beefing up the books to that $4.99, $5.99 for some of the main titles like Joker, is that a sign of them eventually going down, cutting even more to very few titles, and to an eventual licensing deal with other publishers like IDW? Or is this just them being careful after the pandemic shutdowns, in which mostly everyone was hurting?
I think it's more of them just being careful. I don't see us on the verge of a licensing deal quite yet, although I would maybe further down the line, or even with some lesser characters, I could potentially see that happening. But I think this is just them saying, hey, we have, and we talk about all the time, there's so many titles out there. How many really sell? How many are really popular? How many are people really picking up? This year has been a hard year for everyone, and definitely the comic book industry. And so for them to look at it and say, okay, well, do we really need this one? Do we really need this one? What if we take a step back, see how it goes, and then we can always bring them back later? So I think that's more of what they're doing is, I guess, for lack of a better term, trimming the fat, right? Making sure that what they have is what's really selling, what people are really resonating with. And what that does in turn is that allocates more money, maybe for better writers, for better artists, for, to put out really great quality. And, that quality will then be worth it to readers if they're paying that little bit more. So it's all a cycle. It all feeds into itself. But at this point, I don't foresee a licensing deal happening anytime soon.
So far, publishers like Marvel, Dark Horse, Image, Boom Studios are at this point firing on all cylinders from what I see on the new comic book day releases. As you said, there are a lot of books out there, a lot of titles. The indie wall just keeps getting more and more packed. So especially independent books, it seems like they're coming out with more number ones every single week, and readers are trying them out. It's not something that is just being left on the shelf. So I think a lot of readers are moving away from the big two and going into the more independent writers, which is where a lot of these big name artists are going to. They're seeing their work thrive on publishers like Image, Aftershock, and they retain ownership of those things, as opposed to making a character like, and I'm not saying she's a success, but a character like Punchline, she's never going to be yours as much as you love the character. Paul Dini has talked about Harley Quinn, even though he and Bruce Timm really co-created the character together and it feels like his character, he still says that he created a toy and he put it in the sandbox and now it's someone else's turn to play with the toy.
I would say if licensing deals happen, though, I would love to see a lot of crossovers, like just Turtles and Batman. That's all.
More of that, yeah.
Just more of that one.
I heard they're making a sequel to that movie. I'm personally not that excited for it because the first animated film wasn't great. The comics are so amazing, but hopefully we get Splinter in this one and we can get that interaction between Batman and the Turtles, a lot more of it, like we got in the comics. But the new direction that DC is taking their books in is being kicked off with a one-shot called Infinite Frontier, which releases on March 2nd.
We have a quote here from writer Joshua Williamson, who said, quote, "We're taking the aftermath of Dark Knight's death metal and combining it with the best things we love as storytellers about the DC universe, resulting in bold, fun, and exciting new directions. There are a lot of teases to new storylines, surprises, and mysteries for the year set up in Infinite Frontier #0 that you won't want to miss," end quote.
Unlike the DC Rebirth one-shot that was fully written by Jeff Johns, Infinite Frontier will be an anthology issue. It also won't be $2.99 like the DC Rebirth one-shot was. I saw the cover. It definitely reflects on what's happening in Dark Knight's death metal based on how central Wonder Woman has been to death metal so far. And I know a lot of the same writers that were on Future State are now writing the series for example, like Swamp Thing and Harley Quinn for their ongoing series. So a good way to measure on whether or not you'll like that book is if you end up enjoying the Future State stuff.
I'm just thrown off by the word frontier. I hate the word frontier. I don't know why. It just makes me angry.
It reminds me of the Darwin Cook classic, The New Frontier.
Yeah?
Maybe that's what they're going after?
Maybe. I mean, that would make a lot of sense. Listen, I will pick it up. I'll read it. I don't know that I'm particularly excited about Future State. We've talked about it a lot. But I get it. They're wanting to take a pause, try something new, throw stuff against the wall and see what sticks. That's what it feels like to me.
It's funny that you said that because the Exiles Network, I know you're not a listener of that, but there's a guy on there, Christian, who always says that about when it comes to AT&T news, but when it comes to Disney news, he doesn't say that at all.
Oh, so Disney does it too.
Oh, everyone, of course they do. It just that reminded me of that. I had like this Vietnam flashback to that moment of listening to that show. I love the Exiles Network podcast, by the way. Make sure to check it out.
Speaking of Disney news, Allie and AJ. Do you remember Allie and AJ? They used to sing. I don't know. They sang. Anyway, one of their favorite songs, one of my favorite songs by them is the Potential Breakup song. And if you were in high school when the song or middle school when the song came out, you were like, this is my jam. Anyway, they're releasing an explicit version and I'm very excited.
What does that have to do with throwing things against a wall?
We talked about Disney and then I went down a rabbit trail. I fell into Wonderland. Why are you surprised? We have been together for almost 13 years now. Why is this surprising to you?
The award-winning The Reasons I Broke podcast.
Why can't I talk about news that's relevant to me, okay? Allie and AJ are coming out with a new song.
Well, IDW is coming out with the second issue of TMNT The Last Ronin. It was originally pushed to the last Wednesday in January. Almost every day, I would have readers asking me, when's the next issue of Last Ronin? And I told all of them, last Wednesday in January. And now I have to tell them February 17th. And guess how many people are going to show up on the last Wednesday of January?
All of them.
They're all going to show up and they're going to tell me, you told me that it would release today.
That's when you say, well, IDW told me to, and then they change their minds.
That's true. Well, yeah, easily. That is them. It's all IDW. It's not me deciding I'm going to delay it or lying deliberately. That was the date.
And then you go, but follow our Facebook page and you'll get all these updates on there. Boom.
I give them the Previews World site because I'm like, now you can just check all the titles you want. All the dates are on there anytime. It's mobile friendly. Previewsworld.com. IDW has also announced a director's cut to issue 1. Do you think that is a smart move, or is that them trying to pull some more dollars out of this very popular mini, which I don't blame them for?
I think it's a way to stall and make people not angry. Because, yes, they're going to get some more money out of this, but you're also really not putting that much more work or time or effort to releasing this, and you're still going to get the money. And then people are just like, oh, well, I have this. It'll tide me over for another 2 months until we get to February.
As I read this description, I will say Bobby called us out on Discord last week for spoiling who the last turtle was in our news section. I did say the issue's been out for over 4 weeks, so I don't know how long the thing is, but we're going to try to avoid it this week in case you somehow missed last week's or haven't, for whatever reason, read issue number 1 yet.
It's my least favorite turtle.
IDW's description of the expanded release reads, quote, featuring never-before-seen layouts from Kevin Eastman, story notes that date back decades, character design, script pages, and much more. The director's cut delves deep into the lore of the last Ronin's future New York City, where a lone surviving turtle goes on a seemingly hopeless mission to obtain justice for his fallen family and friends, end quote.
I mean, I'm about it. I want to learn more about this world. And yeah, if I pay $4 more to get a director's cut, perfect.
They got me with character designs. I love that shit. Anytime I see that in any art book where you can see what the original designs were, like the Phantasm. There's one of the Batman the Animated Series magazine features, and there it has the different Bruce Timm designs for the Phantasm. All of that stuff is great, and I hope this director's cut has that in there.
I'm sure it will, and I'm sure we'll get to see more of this futuristic New York that they're in and different things to really dive into and just be like, man, what the fuck happened here for it to get to this state. So I think it's a really great idea, but I do really think it's a stalling tactic ultimately at the end of the day, because if things had released as normal, why not save all this for every single issue and release it in like a giant book later?
Something that is not a good idea is a Birds of Prey sequel. I know you really enjoyed it. I wasn't a fan, but the box office and VOD did not do great for that movie. And in an interview with THR, Margot Robbie has said that there are currently no plans for a Birds of Prey sequel.
I mean, I think that's probably the right move. The first one didn't do stellar. I enjoyed it. There were things I really liked about it, but I just... for the most part, I think it was off the mark from what they wanted it to be, so it makes sense there's not a second.
Margot said, quote, I don't know, nothing imminent at this stage, nothing worth mentioning, end quote. I think that's pretty clear that they are not going to go in that direction. I know she is set to appear in Pedo Perv James Gunn's The Suicide Squad. She did not do any additional photography for Zack Snyder's Justice League. I know there was that rumor for like a day that she was going to be a part of that Nightmare sequence, but that isn't happening. I'm struggling a little bit as to where you go with the DCEU's Harley Quinn, because they're going to hesitate on giving her another solo film because they half marketed this movie as that. And I know I don't want a Suicide Squad 2 from James Gunn. I would like one from David Ayer. What I really want is that Gotham City Sirens that Ayer was planning on doing. And I think when we get David Ayer's release his cut of the Suicide Squad, if that ends up being a huge success and we push it as hard as we have Zack Snyder's Justice League, I think that will give us a little bit of hope on giving us that Gotham City Sirens film.
Potentially. I think where you go with Harley is back in time. You make that Harley Joker movie that I'm dying for, and I think that's what you would do with her character. You have those two big names. It would be ginormous, legitimately. So that's what I would do with that. Yes, I would love to see a sequel to Ayer's Suicide Squad. I would love to see the Gotham City Sirens the way they should be done, with Poison Ivy and Harley and Catwoman and the shenanigans they're going to get into. I just think that could be a really great chick team-up movie. I don't know, whatever you want to call it.
Not like Birds of Prey, hopefully.
Not like Birds of Prey. But they had some pieces and they just didn't bring it all together with that one. I just think... that team up, and if you got the right writers, get Paul Dini to write it, right? Something like that would just, except they'd all be naked half the time. So anyway.
Plus, Paul's done with writing Hollywood screenplays. He never wants to do that again.
If they told him he could write Birds of Prey, you don't think he would?
Enough zeros on that paycheck? Maybe.
Probably. So that's where I think you go with her. But ultimately, if they're going to do anything, I think it's going to be a Joker Harley film.
As of this recording, we have yet to watch Wonder Woman 1984. I know we have the option of streaming it on HBO Max, but you and I are waiting to see it in theaters, just I think a few days later than HBO Max's launch. And we will have a review for you next week, but in case you cannot get enough Wonder Woman on HBO Max, the complete series starring Linda Carter is streaming right now, the same day that it went up. We threw it up at the comic book shop. The customers were like mesmerized. They're like, is that Wonder Woman? And it was a good time.
Aww.
I have never, ever sat down and watched the show. This was a show that was before my time, but it is charming as hell to watch. The special effects for what they are, there's like a lot of stunt work in that first season, at least. From what I hear, there was a huge budget cut and a new direction with the later seasons. But that first season, I'm like, this is fucking hilarious. I love this.
I used to watch it and I don't remember a lot of it. So when I saw this news, I was so pumped. I'm very excited to pull it up and dive into it and watch it a little bit more. But it came on Sunday mornings, and you had that Wonder Woman, you had the Green Hornet, the old school one, you had Lois and Clark, The New Adventures of Superman, and there was one other show I don't remember. And if I was lucky, I got to watch all 4 before like we started our Sunday whatever. But it was great for my parents too, because those were, Wonder Woman was a show my mom grew up with, my dad grew up with, and so them getting to watch that with me even when I was younger was nostalgia for them, in the same way that Leah watching Batman the animated series is, nostalgia for you. So I'm really excited not just to dive into this for myself, but to get to watch it with my parents also and be like, yeah, you grew up with this. Like, let's see how it holds up and get to share that with Leo as well.
And next month on HBO Max, they are also adding Batman the Animated Series, the greatest Batman anything of all time, and also Batman Beyond, which people younger than me enjoy. So you hit multiple generations there. I like Batman Beyond just fine, but I am not crazy about the character. I'd say that same fan base that is into like Red Hood, Nightwing, they're into Batman Beyond as well. So I like to call him Batfake. That's no insult to Batman Beyond. That's literally what the Joker calls him. It's an affectionate name from me. I'm going to stick with Batman the Animated Series, but it is what we predicted and everyone else predicted was going to happen when DC Universe ended. This is the final month of it before it becomes an online comic streaming thing only. And all of those things that they had on there, the animated movies and shows, where are those going? Well, we know at least 2 of them are heading to HBO Max next month.
I'm so excited to once again. I was thinking about that the other day. I'm like, we haven't shown Leo that show in forever. So getting to pull that up for him, us getting a break from Shaun the Sheep and Blaze and Paw Patrol to get to watch something far superior.
Even more HBO Max news this week, according to Deadline. Dune and Godzilla vs. Kong may end up getting a traditional theatrical-only release instead of the simultaneous HBO Max and theaters launch. So already changes happening after the threats of lawsuits.
Since Dune isn't set to release until October, the idea is that the pandemic may be a little more under control by then. So if it releases in theaters, it would still do relatively well.
Legendary, on the other hand, is still threatening a lawsuit if it doesn't get a traditional theatrical release unless Warner Brothers hands over and matches the $250 million that Netflix was ready to pay for exclusivity streaming.
$5 says contracts change from here on out to include things with streaming where things like this and different things with the actors where they won't have any hold or any sway against that by saying, no, that's not in our contract. We can sue for this.
I would be shut. They'd be stupid if they weren't already signing those right now. In the event of another pandemic and we can't release this in theaters, instead of giving you your ticket percentage pay, you will instead get X million dollars and you'd have to agree to whatever that amount is. But right now it is messy with these movies that were under that agreement of you got to pay me a percentage of ticket sales. And if you don't release this in theaters, I'm going to sue you because now you're fucking over. You're taking millions from me. Whereas they got to agree with Patty Jenkins, Gal Gadot, giving them each $10 million so that they can then promote the thing that is just about to release. So you better make sure they're happy, which is exactly what they did. But now they got to put these other fires out. And Dune, it sounds like they haven't yet filed anything. It sounds like they're like, all right, well, as long as you release this in theaters, great. People like Christopher Nolan are still out there calling this the worst streaming service. And there's a lot of confusion there because he wanted it in theaters. They released it in theaters. He's still saying he wasn't happy with how they handled it, but he didn't want it delayed at the same time. Huge mess. Dune, I expect that to be what they're saying here, where it will release in theaters. I was excited for it to release simultaneously on HBO Max. I was still and am still going to go see it in theaters first and then rewatch it on HBO Max. But do you think that this is now a backing of promises of everything next year is going to be simultaneously in theaters and on HBO Max?
No, I don't know that that's it. I think maybe as we get further into the year and things start to get a little better, I wouldn't be surprised if, like we said last week, it releases in theaters first for the first week or two, and then it goes up on the streaming service and is only there for a short period of time before it goes away. And because very realistically, the state that we're in is not going to go away for a long time. Let's just be for real. We're not going to turn to January 2021 and everything's better. We're not going to get to July 2021 and everything's better. I think it's realistically another year before things are back or mostly back to the way that they were. I think that right now they're trying to find the right footing to kind of appease everybody and still go this route because, again, I think the way that they're going is ultimately where everybody's going to end up. I think that it will become very commonplace, especially with how much streaming services are used and how different people are using them for. But they're the first ones in this space. So, of course, there's kinks to work out and different things to look at and all angles that they're not going to consider until that lawsuit is slapped on their desk.
I want Kelli a year from now to be listening to this and her saying, maybe a year from now we'll be mostly back to normal.
Stop.
But it's like a nightmare version of you. You've got the mohawk like Deathstroke and you're like, what a fool. What a fool I was.
Did I like shave the sides of my head too? Yes. And I've got, can I be like real beefy?
Yep.
And like a scar over my eye? Like what happened in the last year? I want to be listening to it on an old school radio. I don't know why we're on the radio, but we are.
Well, in that same nightmare future that Kelli is a part of, Zack Snyder did reveal more about it in an interview with Film Junkie and what that timeline would have looked like and how it would have taken place in Justice League Part 2.
We're, of course, all hoping for that to continue, for that to actually be live action, but Snyder did mention the possibility of a comic book with artist Jim Lee to continue the Snyder Cut storyline and explained, quote, "The Joker is somehow involved in the stealing of the Mother Box and using it to create the treadmill. Because, in my mind, Cyborg was always going to do the math and figure out this is what we gotta do to get back in time to warn Bruce correctly." End quote.
He continued by saying that he hopes to also one day do spin-off comics that could show Robin's death at the hands of the Joker.
Or, and hear me out, Snyder, maybe we could just film all of this.
Well, I'm sure that's what he would love to do, especially with all the other actors, or maybe not. It depends on what Zack actually wants for his vision of all of this. Obviously, he wants it to be out there in some form. Mm-hmm. He did say that we would have to ask for this, that these were very loose talks with Jim Lee, but that we would all have to rally and ask for that comic book. And that kind of created a split with the fandom where we're like, yeah, let's start asking for those comics now. And others are saying, live action or nothing at all. We won't settle for comics. And that's where the haters and everyone else came right back out and said, y'all need to just knock it off because Justice League 2 and 3 is never going to happen. At best, you'll get that comic book, but that is literally it. And we've been like, you guys were saying that about the Snyder Cut too, that was never going to happen. You were saying that it didn't even exist. Mm-hmm. And now look where we are. So that's like all right, that tells me we should fight now for that live action because it is very, very much possible. So I'm on that camp of, give us the live action and also tie in comic books. That's honestly, if you want to merchandise this and you want to really make a lot of money off of it, you do the spin-off comic books as well.
Oh, absolutely. I definitely think they should. When he was talking about that, my mind immediately went to The Fountain and how that started out as a comic book or has the full story within the comic book. And so, yeah, I think a side-by-side piece is really smart. Have these different stories that you can tell through the comic book. And because maybe it's okay, Snyder could make a film out of anything, right? But maybe it's not long enough to actually go into a film or doesn't really fit with this particular story that you're trying to tell, but it'd be great to have that background. So yes, in those instances, make a comic. That's awesome. Jim Lee, I don't know, he might take a little while, so maybe partner with somebody else.
He can do covers.
He can do the covers. Excellent. But ultimately, I would love to see these in live action and just have the man start a GoFundMe. We can raise the money.
We've already been saying we need Alex Ross or Lee Bermejo to do the interiors because then they would make it look like Ben Affleck, Gal Gadot, and everyone else. But yeah, I am still like, let's not give up and settle for the comics. Let's still push. And it's still too early, but once Zack Snyder's Justice League releases in March, that's when we got to support that, buy all forms of it, go into theaters and watch it whenever we can, and also then ask for Justice League Part 2. You ask for it in two ways, by supporting it monetarily, because that's the way that it's going to move forward, and also by doing more campaigns to get Zack Snyder's Justice League trending and also get HBO Max trending as well, because AT&T is going to like that this project on this service is beefing up that big service.
You can also just play it on repeat, so it gets all the views. So like you leave for work, you just hit play.
Fuck yeah,
you
that's
come
what I'm
back on your
do.
lunch break, you hit play.
Our internet streaming is going to be ridiculous that month.
Yeah, listen, you just get the unlimited streaming to do. You'll be fine.
I'm going to get, what do they call it, throttling?
What is that what it's called?
I guess when you take up so much internet in your house, your internet service provider eventually just knocks you down to like low quality and very slow internet for the month.
But then you call them and you're like, but Zack Snyder's Justice League, and they're like, oh, you're right, and they bump you back up.
I guess they're fans too. Maybe if it were AT&T, right?
Right, yeah. We could get AT&T prior to, just so that you could watch it.
From what Zack was also hinting, right now AT&T is very focused on pushing and promoting Wonder Woman 1984, and he said that in the new year, that's when you're going to start seeing all of the promotion begin officially from AT&T on Zack Snyder's Justice League. He says that's when the machine is turned on, and I think that's also when he's going to drop probably the final trailer before we get it in March. And I know he said he was working on it right now, so it is happening. It's going to be, I think, a more traditional type of trailer where you can have HBO Max slapped all over it, whereas the first one was more a celebration of we are getting it, and here's all of these scenes and portions of the movie that you haven't seen properly yet.
Are you going to request the day off of work just to watch this?
It lands on a Thursday. I'll be off anyway.
God, look
it's
at
amazing.
that.
I know. I looked that shit up yesterday.
Who's watching Leo?
Leo's gonna watch it too. I don't know who's watching it, but I'm gonna be watching Zack Snyder's Justice League. If he needs to sit down in another room and watch something else, I don't know. It's gonna be 4 hours, but someone's gonna watch Leo. We could go to one of the grandparents and watch it upstairs or downstairs. It's happening. I am not gonna miss Zack Snyder's Justice League in any form. But I hope someone shares this amount of excitement if you're a fan of Wonder Woman, for example. And we're gonna cap everything off as far as the news this week with the interview that Patty Jenkins had on finally setting to rest the rumor that the third act of the first Wonder Woman film was changed by Warner Brothers.
She said, quote, "The original end of the movie was also smaller, but the studio made me change it at the last minute. And so that's always been a little bit of a bummer that's the one thing people talk about because I agreed. And I told the studio we didn't have time to do it, but it was what it was. I ended up loving it, but it was not the original end of the movie," end quote.
What's funny about that third act, and I like the first Wonder Woman film, and I thought the third act was fine, but the original third act was going to fit a little bit more with what Zack was building in the Snyderverse, and the character design for Ares was going to be what we saw in the history lesson in his cut of the film as well. But that was, I'm assuming, one of the other changes too, when they started panicking a little bit after BVS, and probably one of the many demanded changes from WB. In the same interview, she said that they essentially, for the most part, let her do what she wanted with 1984, that them pushing the film back to this month allowed her to create the proper movie that is what we're going to get now, that it's still a little bit shorter than what she wanted, but that she is happy with this current release. It doesn't end in a giant fight as the first one did. She's already said that. She said that it's ended how she wanted, and it's probably how she wanted the first Wonder Woman to conclude as well. But I remember the third act is the one thing that people were constantly harping on that first movie for, saying, oh, this is where the Snyder influence comes because it's a part of that universe. Funny enough, it was changed so that it wasn't like the rest of the Snyder universe, and the original ending would have been more in line with what Zack was building. So it's kind of like really funny how it flip-flopped in when you finally learn the truth.
I really enjoyed the the third act, and I would be interesting to see what it was really supposed to be. So you're saying more in line with Snyder's, vision. What exactly does that entail? And who knows if it would have been a better movie and if fans would have enjoyed it just as much. One thing I didn't like was Ares, how he still looked like weirdo, what's his name? Like even at the end.
David Thewlis?
Yeah, I was like, can he like, I don't know, beef up a little bit? Something?
They did the thing that Jeppy did for his calendar. They photoshopped his head on a buff man's body, remember?
Buff man's body. You're right. Okay, I forgive him. Only because Steve did it too.
The same tech.
However, it's interesting that now she's admitting it instead of, and has she been asked before? And she was like, no, I don't remember. But it's interesting that now she's like, oh, yeah, they changed it. And, of course, when all these other things are coming to light of what WB really did on their movies, on the Justice League and different things like that. So it's interesting. Hopefully, we see Wonder Woman 1984 and really enjoy it. I hope that it is her vision as she says it is. And, from what we've heard preliminarily, it sounds very different from the first one, but we'll see. I did really, really enjoy the first Wonder Woman.
Yeah, that's the one thing that does have me nervous is because I enjoyed the first one, they're saying the sequel is different than the first one. But we'll have a full review for you next week. As far as the future of Wonder Woman, she had said that part 3 was already being thought up of by Patty and Jeff Johns, but since then, obviously, Jeff is no longer a part of this, thankfully, and so she doesn't know. We're probably not going to get that version of the third movie, but that they want to do a Wonder Woman that isn't set in the past. They want to do one that is in current times, so I don't know if that's going to happen. Right now, Patty just signed on for one of those Star Wars projects for Disney, so she may be fully Disney's from here on out. But I think a lot of that will also depend on how 1984 ends up doing.
But that does wrap up our news for the week, and now we can move into our Patreon shoutouts, our thank yous to everyone who helps make the show possible.
First shout out this week goes out to Nick F on Twitter at Jersey Whisperer and on Instagram at buds_bros_and_superheroes.
Nick posted a "What should we watch next?" poll on Twitter between Spider-Man and Man of Steel.
Man of Steel was up by, I think, 1 vote by the time I saw it. I voted, gave it a retweet, and the graph has since completely changed, and it is fully Man of Steel, and
well,
it just took one little retweet, and I'm like, I know what kind of followers I got.
Which Spider-Man was it?
The Tobey Maguire one, and I influenced that election.
Voter fraud.
Is it though? It's kind of like when people get mad at Bulbaganda when they retweet the Bulbasaur polls, and then Bulbasaur, all of us end up getting on there and fully getting Bulbasaur to first place, and they're like, it's fraud. It's like, no, it's not. We're just organized and all voted on this poll. Fraud would be if we made like multiple accounts and voted on them.
You're not disorganized and stupid like those Charmander followers.
Damn right. The filthy trash lizard.
Next up, we have Julian on Twitter at Kage023 or at Lazy Gaming Guys.
Julian has been streaming Super Mario Sunshine and Bomberman on Wednesday nights. Last night, Scott and them also streamed Yakuza, where Julian had a cranberry and vodka and was fully trashed by having one sniff of it. We joke that he is the lightest lightweight in the world, and he gets really mad when we say that.
Is he a lighter weight than my mom?
They're on par.
All right, wow.
Like, Julian, when he gets drunk, he will stay drunk for years.
He's still drunk from the first time.
Absolutely. It takes him a while for his body to metabolize all of that little bit of alcohol.
Up next, we have Christian on Instagram at Christian Like the Religion 131.
Christian's niece officially churned one. He put up these beautiful images of him and his family celebrating that first birthday. Very, very special for everyone involved when you have a little 1-year-old in your life.
They're just precious. I remember Leo when he was 1. He was so much more cooperative. So enjoy it.
Next shout out goes out to Renee on Twitter at Yugi's Pokemon.
Renee has been streaming Shadow Legends.
He streams almost every single day.
Wow.
So if you are a part of our Discord lounge, our Discord bot does put up a link anytime any of our Patreon backers put up on YouTube or on Twitch. So it's a great way to stay on top of what streamers like Renee or Bobby or Lazy Gaming Guys and what their schedule is like. So make sure to check out Renee's once again as he streams Shadow Legends.
Next, we have Corey B on Twitter at Comictropolis.
Corey tweeted, quote, "Outstanding. Got my tickets to finally see Wonder Woman 1984 on the 25th. Guaranteed right after I'm watching it on HBO Max," end quote.
That's the way to do it. See it in theaters, absorb it a little bit, head home, watch it again, pick up everything you didn't get to catch the first time. And you can pause it and rewind where if you're like, wait, what really happened?
No more hollering or clapping or any of that when you're actually in the comfort of your home. I wish I had this back when The Dark Knight released. I could finally hear what Gordon was saying after he was unmasked when he arrested the Joker. Didn't see that for fucking months. Didn't hear what he said for months.
I remember he takes off the mask and everybody's like, "Wah!" And Gordon's like,
and I'm like, shut up, quiet. God damn it. There goes the line. That's when I wish they had subtitles on those things.
Mm-hmm. Don't they always have them? You just have to hold up your little mirror?
In some theaters, they do. Not in all of them.
All right. Next up, we have Abdul Red Haji on Twitter at @rgadanfar.
In response to a tweet saying people turned on Christopher Nolan after his comments about HBO Max and theaters, Abdul Red Haji said, quote, "Nobody turned on him. He's just talking like an idiot, so he's getting treated like one." End quote.
I'm staying out of it. I like Chris Nolan, but I don't like what he's doing right now.
That's the thing. Yeah, like I like Nolan as well, and I really like Tenet. But you can also criticize the things they say if and I'm not a fan of how he's been acting towards our beloved HBO Max. Hopefully he changes his tune come next year. We're going to get Tenet on 4K, and I will be there for his next film. I just hope that he can figure out something with AT&T for his next film so that he doesn't end up saying things that alienating a lot of the fan base out there.
Our next shout out goes out to Manu on Twitter at ManUnited0710.
Eagerly waiting. Hopefully he returns one day to Twitter. And the final shout out also goes out to Jimmy.
Jimmy, thank you so much for your Patreon support and for tuning in every single week.
One last time, huge thanks to Nick F., Julian W., Christian, Renee, Corey B., Abdul Red Haji, Manu, and Jimmy for your Patreon support this month.
If you, too, would like your shout-out every single month for as little as $1 a month, that's only 25 cents an episode, we will stalk your social media and let everybody know what's going on.
If you want to be heard on the podcast, you can leave us a voicemail. There's a link in the description of today's episode, but you can also head on over to speakpipe.com/thereasonsimebroke. If you have a comment about one of these news stories, or if you have a question and you want to be heard on the show, that's a great way to submit a message. You can do it right from your phone.
But of course, our podcast will always be free. The best thing you can do is let other people know about us. You all have a friend who got some kind of device over the holidays this year. So say, hey, listen, I don't know if you listen to podcasts. You should. Here's a great one to check out.
Onward to, as voted on by you, our comic book highlight of the week.
This week, we have The Department of Truth number 4. This is written by James Tynion IV with art and colors by Martin Simmons.
Every Wednesday morning, we put up the poll on Twitter right under our new Comic Book Day haul, and we ask what you want to hear discussed or reviewed on next week's episode, and this week you chose The Department of Truth. Just in case, there will be spoilers in this discussion as we talk about the plot and what happened in this issue, so if you want to skip ahead to the Brocat block, please do. But I do recommend that everyone read Department of Truth because it was also another excellent issue. It's been a while since we discussed it, I think since issue 1 or 2. What were your thoughts on issue 4?
I still really like the premise of this book, I will say, and I think the art is the hardest part for me. It very much pulls me out of the story because it's just very out there, and I get that it fits in with this kind of story, but for me personally, I feel confused the whole time, which again is very much in line with what this book is, and I understand that, but it's hard for me to really get invested in what's going on in these different conspiracy theories. They're throwing a lot at you, and when you look at the pages at a glance between the dialogue and the art, there's just so much going on that it's just kind of like brain overload. So this particular issue kind of dove into different conspiracy theories related to the government. And so I think for a lot of people that would be super interesting. I try to stay away from politics as much as possible. So I was just like, okay, I guess those are theories that people have. But the way that they kind of took these 12 very different theories and kind of rolled them together, that even the characters in the book are like, oh, well, this makes a lot of sense. It's like, no, those are all if you look at them separately, you're all going to go, no, that's not even possible. But when you put them all together, and it's just kind of showing how people in general just grab onto whatever and make it work in their mind.
The last two issues tackled a specific conspiracy theory. The issue 3 was about the false flag conspiracy. And I forget what issue 2. I know issue 1 was about the flat earth theory, but this one, as you mentioned, it was about the government and how the Department of Truth is trying to preserve the world, because in the premise of this series, when enough people start believing in that conspiracy, it starts to change the world to make that thing true. And there is an organization out there, there's 2 from what this issue was saying, that are trying to make certain conspiracies a reality because they would benefit in a massive way from those things becoming true. So that's when they're talking about, well, if Obama is really from Kenya, or and they're going through all of these different conspiracies. They talk about the Clintons as well, JFK, and how, as you mentioned, they all connect together, and how these organizations are trying to change it. But our main character is also doubting everything else too, of, am I really on the right side here? Are these really the bad guys? Am I doing the right thing? Who is trying to really preserve truth? And it's really fascinating to me, especially because it's neat to see the conspiracies that, yes, we all know about already or have seen, but then the ones that I never knew about, that I'm like, oh, that's kind of interesting. Not in a way of like, is it really true? But it's fun to play with that fantasy of what if. And I think this book is doing just that. It's not promoting one is true or not true or whatever. It's more playing with the idea and having this character try to decide, as well as us, of, am I really on the right side here?
Definitely very interesting. You can tell that there's a lot of thought that goes into this book and the story that they're telling, and the research that they've done into these different conspiracy theories. And it ultimately feels like the author is just having a lot of fun writing this, of being like, yeah, what other kooky thing can I put in here that people actually believe? Ha ha ha. So, if you really enjoy conspiracy theories, I definitely recommend this series. I will say, if you're more of a casual reader, it's a little difficult to digest. Like I said, for me, I just feel very confused every time I finish one of these books, and I'm just like, that was very uncomfortable.
Yeah, it's not a traditional comic by any means, where you have like a fall and a rise, and although it does end in a bit of a cliffhanger, so did the last issue. James Tynion does do a really nice job of still retaining that comic book format, but it's not a traditional story at all. But I'm really liking it. It is, in fact, one of my favorite books releasing, and one that I look forward to every month.
That's really great. It was better than Sonic, so thanks, guys.
Yeah, Sonic didn't get voted up. Good. I'm still waiting for the Reptilians to show up. They talked about them this issue, so I'm waiting for them. They've since tackled the more serious stuff, and I'm like, all right, let's get the reptoids.
Where's Nessie?
Where's Mothman? They're like, Daniel, the reptilians are not cryptids. And I'm like, oh, they kind of are.
Don't forget to vote every single Wednesday for what comic you would like us to review, not Sonic. That's it. That's my only story. That's all I have.
Don't forget, every time you say not Sonic, they're going to be more compelled to vote for Sonic next time.
Apparently not this week, so thanks, guys.
Because I think last time you were like, totally Sonic, yeah.
Oh, I mean, yeah. I'm so sad Sonic didn't win. I just read this issue for fun, and like he just rolled around and beat people up.
It was the final issue of Sonic Bad Guys, too. Well, that's one thing. Now it's only going to show up once a month in the poll.
I mean, that's the worst news ever.
Let's head into the final portion of this week's episode. It is what Palpa, Kelly, and I have been doing on this very busy week, the Brocat Block.
Yes, we are right in the heart of Christmas week. So you, of course, working retail, me in the food and beverage industry. And, in years past, we kind of say goodbye to each other at Thanksgiving and see each other on the other side. And we've had a little more time with each other this year, which is great. But this week in particular for me, I know has been wild. Anything cuckoo bananas going on for you?
It's been a busier week than Black Friday was. Absolutely 100%. I was absolutely exhausted yesterday, and it's been a steady stream of we're running out of Pops, we're running out of Pokemon again, and it's a great problem to have, but it is very exhausting. And it's a story of success of I'm bringing in so many people, and it's still not, I don't think, as good. I'll have to compare it to last year's. I know our Black Friday wasn't as good this year. I'm curious to see what our Christmas week is like. But a lot of holiday shoppers are choosing to shop local, and honestly, some of them have no choice. They're like, I'm not going to get this by tomorrow. I'm not going to get this by Christmas Day. What can I find here that I can get for my friend or dad or whatever? And they're coming in and they're buying what we have, and that's going to be one of the other gifts that they give on Christmas week. So it's been really cool. We've had to limit, of course, the amount of people that come into the store several times throughout the day, which is amazing. The people are coming in for their new comic book day books right before the holidays. Some are heading out on vacation, so they want to make sure they have some reading material. So they're also picking up trade paperbacks. I'm having people that flew in from other states finding our store and picking up reading material from when they're back on the plane. I've had a couple people already mention that. So I'm really, really happy with what this week's been like at the shop, but it has been very busy, a little bit stressful, but I'm glad we're getting through it as we move into the new year. I know that the week after Christmas is also traditionally very busy as people come in, use their gift cards and use their holiday money and go into their local stores to pick up even more stuff.
Yeah, even through the stress, because we're way busier than I ever anticipated this week as well. It's just kind of going in with that mentality and that reminder of, it's great that I'm in this spot because there's a lot of people who aren't. There's a lot of stores who aren't. There's a lot of places that aren't making money right now. And so for your store to be this successful, even though it's stressful, even though it's exhausting, even though there's a lot going on, just a really great place for you to be in. And listen, 2 more weeks, we're almost out of it.
This week, we were also a part of Film Gob's 2020 Christmas special. There's going to be a link to it in the description of today's episode. Very grateful to have been asked to submit a short clip for his compilation of other friends and creators for this 2020 special. It is awesome. I watched it as it was being live streamed. They had a live premiere, but it is now up on his YouTube channel. And there were a lot of people I recognize, especially from Twitter, in the chat and also in the video itself. He made fun of James Gunn. He even made fun of Lord Feige. He made fun of these bloggers like Campea and all the stuff that all the nonsense that they've said throughout the years about the Snyder Cut and the DCEU and everything else. All of the shills. Jody's Corner showed up in there too. Amazing video, amazing channel. Make sure to subscribe to Film Gob if you haven't already. But again, there will be a link in the description of today's episode.
For me this week, it's just been incredibly busy at work. A lot of call-ins, a lot of people getting sick right before the holidays, as they always do. And I'm now at that point of the year where I have to go from being understanding manager to firm manager and say, no, this is what you got to do. I can't just give you time off. This isn't an excused absence. I need you to come to work. And I'm at that point now, and I'm struggling with that because I want to be like, oh no, take the time you need. I'm so sorry this is happening. But on the flip side, you're inconveniencing everybody and you're waiting for me to tell you it's okay to actually do it instead of just saying I'm calling in, right? And so that's what I've been working through this week. But just incredibly busy. I think we were up like 90% the other day from where we were last year, which is absolutely incredible looking back on this last year. It's been so much work from the time, it was a year ago I stepped into this store and took over and started making these changes. And nobody ever anticipated we would get to where we are. So reaffirms that I'm in the right place for myself. That I really enjoy. I still super love my job, probably too much. And so, I'm excited to roll into 2021 and see where that takes us. But I'm also really happy to just get over this out of this holiday season. And even though I don't think things will magically be different in January, just the mindset of we're out of 2020, I think will be impactful for a lot of people.
Well, let's cap things off with, we hadn't really discussed, and I don't think we ourselves have done any kind of big holiday special. Maybe we did in the past, an episode or two, but this year with everything that's been going on, obviously we've been pulled in several different directions. But why don't we pause for a sec and reflect on previous Christmases or holidays that we've had, and what are some that you kind of remember, or some memories either from your childhood or with Leo, or just the holidays in general?
I will say this holiday season so far with Leo is pretty memorable. He's, of course, 3 now, kind of understands a little bit more, gets excited over presents, over Santa Claus, over all these different things. So I'm really taking time throughout the season to pause and kind of enjoy those moments with him and just kind of relive Christmas through his eyes. Because I think in the past, you and I have both worked. Our entire families have had to work. And so it's really been difficult to come together as a family and really enjoy that time when you're like, okay, well, I have 3 hours here. We're going to celebrate. And then I have to go to work, or so-and-so has to go to work. I have to do that. So this Christmas is really memorable for me for that. I will say something that I always look forward to is New Year's Eve, and this will actually be our 13th New Year's Eve together, which just blows my mind every time we tack on another year. But that is probably my favorite night of the year. We haven't ever missed a New Year's Eve together, and it just, when I realize we aren't going to miss another one, it just always makes me very excited. I will probably say my favorite New Year's Eve was the one New Year's Eve I had to work and you actually came to my work so that we wouldn't miss that New Year's Eve kiss. And this year I anticipate we will be asleep and setting our alarms for 11:58 to wake up and not miss it either.
Perpetual tiredness, right? Getting old.
You mean parenthood?
Well, that's something that when Brian Schaub came into the store and they were talking about, having more than one kid, like the state of that. And Brian mentioned he's like, well, the thing is you're just always tired. And
We're
you just
already there.
get used to just being always tired. On my end, I will say it does feel like the holidays are a lot richer with a kid involved. And I think it would just, with anyone's kid involved in Christmas, because I know our siblings are older now. My brother's 5 years younger than me. My sister, she just graduated high school already, but now, and they still get to enjoy the holidays and Christmas, but it's on a different level than when you're a kid. And having Leo there and we all get kind of wrapped up in that excitement as well. I think that's a special part of it. And I think next week we may talk more specifically about Leo's presence and his excitement and his gifts and how we enjoyed seeing him run around and really be excited. But I think the most important part is that we are lucky and fortunate enough to all still be together and no one got sick and passed away or this year itself, that we're all together another year and our family members are here once again to celebrate this Christmas as we have in the previous years too. And I think that's something to also pause and reflect and be happy for, because no year, tomorrow's never guaranteed, next year's not guaranteed. And I think it's great that we can just celebrate another Christmas together with the family members that are in our life.
Absolutely. I think family is what makes the holidays rich, and getting to spend that time with everybody. And the fact I was talking to the other day, the fact that Leo loves both of our parents, both of our sets of family so much and gets to spend all that time. I was telling you, anytime that we drive anywhere, he wants to call one set of grandparents and wants to talk to them on the phone in the car. And he can't hardly talk. He's, but he wants to tell them about his day and babble. And for me, that's just so important. I'm closer to my grandmother now than I ever have been, but both sets of grandparents lived pretty far away, and I didn't get to see them often growing up. So the fact that we can give that to our son is probably the greatest thing that I could ever ask for. But, just even the fact that we get the opportunity to spend it together. And yes, I could reflect back on past Christmases for sure and say, oh, when I got my N64, that was I do remember that Christmas. That was pretty great. But, really living in the moment, being in the present right now and saying this Christmas is great because, and it's great because we get to spend the whole day with your family one day and the whole day with my family. And we both have more flexibility than we've had in the last 13 years we've been together to really do that. And to get to share that with our son and create those memories for him is probably the most important Christmas to me because of that.
Well, I am happy that I'm in a position now where I don't have to work on Christmas Day. I totally get it with anyone that does have to work on Christmas Day, because I've been in the past, I've had 3 jobs at one point, and it's I worked almost every single day, and I definitely haven't had Christmas Day or Thanksgiving Day off. It's only been a few years that I've had that fortunate part of
that
it.
Luxury.
That luxury. So I get it, honestly, and I know that anyone that does work Christmas Day, to you, it's going to be a different day as Christmas, and that's great. That's fine. Whenever you can get the family together or your friends together, or where you can take some time and relax and celebrate your Christmas or your Thanksgiving or your New Year's, I think it's all about when you can actually do it as opposed to doing it on the day itself. So that's something that I totally also I understand and I appreciate too. And a shout out to anyone that did end up working on Christmas Day or during the holidays. And hopefully you get that awesome Christmas bonus this year if your line of work gets it, or if not, that we are working during this period, and that we're lucky enough to actually be in a position to be working and healthy for the most part. So there's it's a matter of finding the things, especially this year, finding the things, the positives in life that you can say, okay, well, at least I have a working car right now, or I'm not sick, I am able to go into work.
Absolutely. I think, something I've been working on for myself is being present and living in the moment and recognizing those things and trying not to focus on all the other things that aren't going right. So if you just take these next few days leading up to the new year and saying, 2020 was a dumpster fire, but this one piece was really great. This one thing was awesome. Anything that you can celebrate in the moment, I think, is very important.
This also being the final episode of 2020 for the Reasons I'm Broke podcast. I do want to take a second to thank all of you for sticking around throughout this very difficult year, the support during this very difficult year, especially I know Bobby and all the Brokehead Core members, Brian, everyone on our Patreon, everyone that even listens, anyone that we interact with on Twitter that especially came forward during the summer when I got furloughed and there was support from all kinds of places and everyone was struggling. Everyone was just keeping in contact and talking to one another and getting us through these things. We had people on the podcast that worked in comics or from previews that were like, this is a really bizarre situation and let's document it. Let's talk and discuss and have it on there, have it on this podcast or have it online. It was a very bizarre year, but I think that we got creative with it as much as we could for what it was. To anyone that may have discovered the show this year and stuck around throughout all of that and into the end of this year, into this podcast, huge thanks. And to everyone that's been there since 2012 and in between, that's been huge. That's the kind of stuff that's helped us keep this episode going, this podcast going through a year like 2020.
Just this episode in particular.
Even just this episode, honestly, it can be... It's been a very rough year for a lot of people out there, and this has been one of the escapes too, and I hope that us making this has helped someone out there. If it has helped one person at some point, then it's obviously very much worth it.
Absolutely. As we say over and over again, we do this show for all of you, for you. So if it helps you, we love to hear about it, but more importantly, we're still going to be here.
So thank you so much, Brokehead Core. On to 2021. I've been Lady Suit Daniel.
And I'm Emperor Palpa Kelli.
And Brokehead Core, all will be well. Dun 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 dun.
I don't know it. That's as far as I go.
Dun 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 dun. And a merry holiday. Is that not the?
I mean, I think it's a New Year's song.
They play that in New York, right? Dun 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 dun. Does it feel like New Year's yet?
Yeah, sometimes. Yeah, sure. Are they still going to do the ball drop this year?
Every year they do it,
All
and
right.
I'm sure there will be many people within 6 feet of it. Everyone.
It's okay. We'll watch it anyway. I'm excited. New Year's is my favorite night of the year. I'm so excited.
Happy New Year, Brokehead Core. Thank you very much.